Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Potentialization, and thank you everyone for joining us. Just a reminder, this session is recorded and it will be put onto our YouTube channel where you can see this talk and all the previous talks. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more. This talk itself is going to be 30-40 minutes long, and there'll be a Q&A session afterwards, 20 to 30 minutes. If you've got any questions during the talk, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we can then go through them when we open it to the floor for questions. Then we'll also be sharing our potentialization Linktree details in the chat box and in the description of the video when it's put on YouTube as well. So you can follow us on all of our social media outlets there. So this week we have MichellePratt as our guest. So welcome, Michelle.
Hi, Phil.
Hiya.
Hi.
And so the title of this week's talk is a fascinating one, which is Let Your Authentic Strengths Shine, which is just brilliant because with so much uncertainty that's around at the moment, you know, what's authentic is very true to a person. So it'd be great to help and support people, enable them to shine with their strengths. So really looking forward to this one. So first of all, Michelle, could you just tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's MichellePratt. I'm a learning and development professional. So I do management development, training and coaching for my own business, Dive Deeper Development. I'm also a Strengthscope Practitioner and Strengthscope Leader Practitioner. So strengths is something I use not only in my business, but in my life too. So a subject close to my heart, Phil.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you've been doing coaching for many years now as well. So yeah
quite some time.
Brilliant, brilliant, cool. So you're saying that, and one of the things with authentic strengths, and I know from our previous conversations as well, one of the things that you say is it's always better to focus on your strengths and what you're good at rather than your development areas. And I find that fascinating because I've heard from other places it's good to focus on the gaps and the weak points to eliminate them. But I'd really love to hear your views on why it's better to focus on strengths rather than development areas.
Yeah, it's a good question, Phil. And it's, as you say, it's an interesting one. You get conflicting advice about this, but I definitely an advocate now of developing your strengths as opposed to any shortcomings you perceive you might have. And that might be counterintuitive to how many people were brought up. So Phil, I think I might have asked you this before, but if you think about taking a spelling test or a test at school when you were a child, and let's say you got 7 out of 10 right, I don't know about you, Phil, but did your parents or teachers, the adults, they focus on the 3 you got wrong, or did they focus on the 7 you got right?
Oh, well, they definitely focused on the ones I got wrong, but it was normally 7 wrong and 3 right in spellings for me. But it was definitely focusing on what was wrong and what I need to learn from that perspective rather than elevating what was right. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's true, and I think this is how a lot of us have been brought up at school and at work, the workplace to an extent as well. But if you think about it, you know, you could focus on the 3 that the child got wrong, but you could look at it a different way and say, well, actually, what if we looked at the 7 that you got right? How did you do that? And perhaps the child might say, well, I spelt them out: Monday, Tuesday, Saturday. And then you might go, okay, that strategy worked for you. You got 7 out of 10 right using your strategy. So let's see, we can use that same strategy or method and tweak it to get the others right. So we could say February or Wednesday and actually work and elevate what the child is doing. And this is the same for us as adults too. When you get successes, that's where your successes are coming from. This is where you're doing something right. So it kind of makes sense to leverage that strategy, take what works and do more of it. There's a couple of other reasons why I think that working on your strengths might be more beneficial. The second one is that your brain is just wired to be better at some things than other things. So call it nature or nurture, but from a very young age, certain synaptic connections just fire off that much quicker. You'll never be perfect at everything, and that's actually fine because that's true of everybody. So, your strengths, these are the things that just connect, they just fire off. And so if you work at those, you have the potential to really shine. If you focus on the things where you're not so good and they don't come so naturally, you can work on them till you're good at them. You can even be very good at them if you work hard enough, but you're never going to be brilliant at those, especially not compared to someone who has that as a strength. And the final one is, I'd say that it's also just a lot more enjoyable when you work to strengths. And I think this does something to your motivation levels too. So I use a tool called Strengthscope. And when we do that, we talk about two paths, a path of limitation and a path of possibility. So here's the thing. When we focus on what we lack or what we got wrong or what we don't have, that doesn't feel very nice. And actually, if we've done it too much, we might start to become defensive or a bit fearful. So become very closed in our thinking. And then we start to get defensive. And when that fear mindset is triggered, our brain tries to lighten the cognitive load, helpfully, by discarding options and ideas. So then what we have is less options, or we feel less hopeful or less resourceful at the very time when we need innovation and creativity. It eludes us. If you look at the path of possibility the other way round, when we focus on what we do well, that feels really motivational. And then we start to generate ideas. And when you generate ideas, you generate options. When you've got options, you've got some semblance of control, you have hope. And of course, that fosters trust, collaboration, and this mindset of productivity. So it actually fosters the right emotional resources and mental resources for addressing a challenge. So that's why I'd advocate a solutions focus or a strengths focus rather than a problems focus or a weakness focus, I suppose.
That's absolutely fascinating. And it's kind of being pro what you do want and building from what you know what's good rather than fighting against what you don't want. And kind of like you can easily see how with how you've explained it there, how that's a much it's kind of like you're flowing with the tide rather than fighting against the bit of tide you don't want. So yeah, absolutely. So that's really fascinating. And but almost like you were saying just a little bit earlier, that there are many different strengths and you can't be good at everything. And so how would somebody know what their authentic strengths are, as opposed to just something that they're good at, perhaps because they've done it for a long time and this kind of thing? You know, what is it exactly that you mean by authentic strengths?
Yeah, this is an important part as well, because you're quite right, Phil. You can be good at anything if you do it enough. And Malcolm Gladwell advocated this 10,000 hours theory, and it's true. If you spend enough hours at something, you'll be really, really good at it. But it doesn't make it a strength. It doesn't mean you'll have any natural aptitude for it. It doesn't mean that you'll ever truly shine at it, and it doesn't mean it will bring you any joy or motivation. So you become very accomplished, but you might not be happy or satisfied or motivated. So a good clue to a real strength for me, Phil, is something that energizes you, something that really gets you buzzing. And I believe that activities either drain your energy or they energize you. And you can do both competently, but it will feel very differently. And an example of this, Phil, is I remember one day in a very stressful job when I was pigeonholed in the wrong role for me. I'd spent all day, it felt like an uphill struggle, and I was absolutely done in. I felt mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted. And I left the office thinking, I just want to go to bed. I just want to grab something quick to eat and just collapse in my bed. And this was like 6 o'clock. But I'd arranged to start with a charity, one we both volunteer with, for AKT. It was my first ever meeting with them. And I thought I could really do without this meeting today. I just want to go home. But I thought, no, I'm going to show Willin, my first ever meeting. I'm going to show up. And so I showed up, and then I found myself in a room talking about coaching, talking about mentoring with a group of people that share my values. And I was so energized. When I came home from that meeting, I was buzzing. Like I'd gone from being on the floor to being on fire. I could have kept going for the rest of the day then. I could have gone through the night. And I came back to my wife. I was like, and I met another thing, and I did this thing, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And she just couldn't get me to wind down before going to bed. She's like, you're just going to have to chill out a bit. So how do you go from having no energy and complete physical and mental exhaustion to go from being absolutely full of beans? And so your energy is a good clue. If you're using your strengths and you're feeling energized by a task, even if it's quite demanding, there's a good chance that you're using a strength. I'd probably point to a few more things too. A good strength is something that you're naturally drawn to, the kind of task you gravitate towards. It's something that you can probably learn quickly. So interestingly, a strength is not necessarily something that you're good at yet. but it may come quickly to you. So for example, I can't really speak Spanish, but languages come to me quite quickly. I could probably pick it up. And the final one I'd probably point to is that if you get lost in the zone, so I always say this wrong, but mihai chick semihai, his state of flow. If you find it's absorbed in a task, it's totally engrossing. You look up at the clock and hours have passed. This is a good sign that that's a strength. So the challenge is to rather than doing things that you're good at, possibly because you've been required to, which may not be authentically you, create space for the things that come naturally, that you're drawn to, that energize. That's much more likely you're using a strength in that scenario.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's very, very clear as well. And as you were saying that, I was thinking similarly, when I was in a job where I was out of alignment, if you like, and it's a very, very draining day. And but I was supposed to be playing badminton in the evening at my badminton club. And I thought, no, I'm going to turn up, even though I'm knackered and I won't be able to do anything. But that's like my portion of the day rather than doing stuff that I was out of alignment on. And I don't know what happened, but it was like magic. It was like I was totally in the zone, totally in the flow, and the time just vanished, and it was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, cool. So it is, I can really see that, which is really good. So that's kind of great to identify your authentic strengths and to focus on those. But with so much going on in life, we're going to be doing things where a whole variety of things won't always just be able to do our authentic strengths potentially. So what should we do about our weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, it's true. You're quite right, Phil. There are certain things we just have to get done and we can't always avoid them. And you're right. So the whole idea of a strengths philosophy is not so much that we avoid doing the things that we consider weaknesses. In fact, I've seen a lot of people use this as an excuse. So I've worked in teams where I've had colleagues go, oh, I don't do detail, allowable weaknesses. I'm more of an ideas person. And it's really irritating. And it doesn't really help the team a great deal, to be fair. So there are a few things we can do. I mean, first of all, Phil, you're right. There are some things we just have to get done. So we have to maybe develop our skills in those areas just enough that they don't hold us back. So if you have a job description, for example, there may be parts of the role where you don't have a strength, but you need to be able to be competent at them to be able to perform the task. And even if there are other people that can perform the task for you, another teammate you can draw on, you have to be able to do that if you were required to. I heard a story about this with Tiger Woods. I'm always a bit, there's loads of stories about Tiger Woods, so I'm never sure how true they are, but I had heard that he was once having trouble with his bunker play and that he was losing 2 shots around on his bunker play. And the story goes that he spent enough time on his bunker play that he'd get within 1 shot of his opponents. So he never tried to catch up with his opponents. He just wanted to get within 1, and he was happy to lose the 1 shot. Where he put his focus was on his fairway play, because he could gain 4 shots on the fairway over his opponents. And so he could gain more shots there by leveraging his strength rather than fixing his weakness. So he did it enough so he didn't hold him back. And then he switched his focus back to the thing where he was really outshining everybody else. That's a good example of just upskilling enough. That's the first one. A second thing we can do is use a strength to overcome a perceived weakness or a gap in our capability. So I was coaching a client, also a friend of mine, who was thinking of going for a job. Now, she was a manager thinking of going for a more senior management position. And there were 2 concerns. One, she had a question, am I good enough? Do I have the qualities I need to apply? And the second thing that she wanted to ponder was whether or not she would enjoy it, because typically the further up the management chain you go, the further you are from the front line. And that's what a lot of people enjoy. So we identified some gaps of areas where either she wouldn't enjoy the tasks or she thought that she didn't have enough experience or capability yet, and would that put her off applying? But we looked at her strengths, and after we talked about the strengths, the qualities that she's really good at, as well as the things that energize her, we identified she is really great relationship builder and she's really good at developing other people. So actually she thought, well, hang on, if I get into that role, I can delegate some of these tasks to other people. I'm guilty of holding on to things. I know these people will enjoy the development, and I can use my relationships and my networking skills to get things done or to learn very quickly. So very quickly, she began to understand that it wasn't that she personally had to do it all. And of course, if you go up in the management ranks, you're not expected to do every task yourself. That's good management. So in the end, she applied for the job and she got it, which is great news, which she might not have done had she not identified the strengths. So use a strength to overcome a perceived gap. And then the final one is, I'd say, draw on other people's strengths. So if you're in a team in particular, or you're good at collaborating, or you have a network, if there's something that you lack, as long as you can do it well enough that it doesn't hold you back, you could draw on others and actually do a bit of a strengths exchange. So they may be able to pick up the slack. And although it's a paid service, for example, Phil, one of my worst non-strengths is detail orientation. So I hate doing my books as a self-employed person. I give it to an accountant because, why wouldn't I? Because I could spend 2 days doing my books. They wouldn't be, at the end of the day, there'd still be errors. I would feel like pulling teeth. I would hate every second, and I could earn more in the 2 days and have more fun in the 2 days than it would take to do my books. It's worth paying the accountant, clearly, in that case. So there are 3 things you can do. Again, I mentioned I use Strengthscope. Their philosophy is you should spend about 20% of your time focusing on your non-strengths and about 80% of your time focusing on your strengths. So that's a good question. We don't ignore them, but the suggestion is about 20-80. And I think that's not set in stone, but I think that's a good guideline.
Brilliant. That's absolutely fascinating. So just the whole thing of, I guess acknowledging them is a big thing as well, so that you can upskill just enough, because that way you're taking ownership and responsibility, but you're acknowledging that it's not a strength. And then also knowing what your strengths are so you can counteract. Also, like you say, having the right people around you to draw on their strengths, so that collectively everybody can be better together. It's this kind of thing where if there's a sports team, isn't it, hopefully the potential of the collective is greater than the sum of the parts. So you can use all of that kind of thing to elevate up. Absolutely brilliant. And just a little while ago you had mentioned about being pigeonholed, and that can happen, and sometimes you might not necessarily know that you've been pigeonholed until after it's happened, and you kind of find yourself out of alignment. So how would knowing your strengths and exploring your strengths help to avoid that?
Yeah, and Phil, yeah, you're right. I mentioned being pigeonholed, and this for me is the number one reason why you should know your strengths and focus on them. Because this happened to me. So we said before, you could be good at anything if you do it enough, and that happened to me. I was in a role, and I took on responsibilities that were team responsibilities, but no one else in my team was doing them, and I recognised that we were going to fail if someone didn't pick up the slack. So I took on a lot of very detailed tasks. Now, I've just told you I don't like detailed stuff. It's not my bag. I can do it competently. So this is not about ability. I was very good at it, but it wasn't my thing at all. And actually doing that felt very draining. And over time that felt stressful. And we had a facilitator in doing a team insights discovery session, one of those personality profiles. And the exercise was take these cards, the different color cards with different qualities on, and keep 4, we had 7. So keep 3 or 4 in your one hand. They're the ones that you identify with yourself, and then give the rest to other people. So by the end of the session, you were given cards from other people. So you ended up with yours and theirs. And in that particular role, I had like 3 red and a yellow, which I get for myself. So people, ideas, creativity, action, and everyone else gave me the blue ones, which was, in introspection, introversion, detail, process. I was like, I went to the facilitator and went, but that's not me. I do this stuff because I have to. This isn't who I am. And so we had a conversation about perception. But it was interesting because I don't think I've ever felt as stressed as I felt in that job. And so I had a conversation sometimes later with my manager, who had read Now Discover Your Strengths, and he was really on board with this. And he said, Michelle, we need, other people in the same role as you. No one else is doing as many different things as you are, that you're being pulled in different directions. We need to create a space where you can play to your strengths. And it took a few months, but sure enough, he managed to work out a job swap where I could go and do what I'm really good at and what I enjoy, and another colleague wanted to do my job. So it was the same role, same department. And And I was really reluctant to let go at first. And I think sometimes ego plays a little bit in there. I do suffer from Obi-Wan Kenobi syndrome sometimes. You know, if someone says, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. I'm like, oh, okay then. Or, you know, oh, if no one else can pick this up, I do feel obliged. But by doing things that weren't my natural strengths, that I didn't enjoy, that didn't energize me, that I found really difficult, I got good at them. And because I got good at them, my colleagues gave me more of those things to do. I'll give it to Michelle. She's really good at that. And because I got more of it, I got even better at it. Because I got better at it, I became more associated with a whole bunch of qualities that I didn't like. So when my manager facilitated the job swap, at first I didn't want to let go because I had a team of direct reports. And I said, but I don't want to lose the team. And he said, Michelle, you're a good manager, but you really excel at design, or you really excel at consultancy, and you really, you know, you can do this management training. No one else can do that the same way you can. That's where you're really going to shine. And he was absolutely right. My career rocketed. I was happier. I was more engaged. I was motivated. But of course, my results were better too. So I became associated with the things that I wanted to do, the qualities I wanted to use, the task I wanted to be associated with. And this almost crafts your personal brand. So when I say be authentically you, or use your authentic strengths, that's why it's really important to know them, communicate them, and create space for them in your day-to-day life and work.
It's so important, isn't it? And sometimes because they're authentic, and we might not give them as much value as we should, because perhaps we associate value more to things that have been hard graft to learn, if that makes sense. Yeah, so it's so important to know what they are. So have you got any more tips on knowing what your strengths are?
Yeah, there's a few things you can do. So I mentioned energy earlier, so it might be worth observing yourself. So notice the tasks that energize you. And a good clue is notice what kind of tasks do you find yourselves drawn to. So not just at work, but perhaps in your personal life as well. So if you say you're out of alignment at work, think about your personal life. Are you naturally into caring for people? Are you into video games? Do you build things? What the tasks that you do for their intrinsic value that you're not getting paid for? And this might offer you some clues, and you might spot some common threads throughout those activities. It was really funny. I was doing a career workshop for a large company, and we asked people what they wanted to be when they were 8, and the woman said a roller skating waitress. She said, I went to a 50s diner and it looked so glamorous. And I said, okay, fine, what do you want to do at 16? And she said something really random, but quite glamorous. And then I asked where she was now, and she's doing accounts. And I said, well, she said, I hate this. And I said, well, those things, those jobs, they're a bit different. But think about your roller skating waitress. That's very dynamic. There's something about personal presentation. There's something about being in the spotlight. And she was like, yeah, all of those things apply to me. Then we traced all her ideal jobs back through her career, and they were some common themes. So look out for the things you're drawn to. Also look for the things that you learn quickly. Phil, you mentioned there, sometimes we take them for granted. In fact, they might even feel like an indulgence. But if you're good at learning this quickly, this is really good. So I mentioned, although I don't work with languages, it's something that I know I can pick up. So very linguistic things like talking therapies, for example, it's no surprise that I can do that kind of thing. And then finally, look for things where you are in the zone. So where are the tasks where the time just flies, you're in the zone, you've got your head down, and even if it's quite hard, it ultimately feels satisfying to you. There are other ways you can find these. Those are the big clues. An exercise I sometimes do with people is just to ask them to think of their best ever day at work, something specific, and just get them to write it down or talk about it, and ask them who was there, who wasn't there, what were you doing, what was engaging about it, what did you like. And you could do that for 2 or 3 different jobs or best days at work you've ever had. And again, you could spot the clues. Finally, there are, as I mentioned, I use Strengthscope. There are profiling tools out there. And so quite often I use Strengthscope for people in the workplace, and that will literally give one of 24 strengths, and I'll highlight the ones that shine most strongly for each individual as well. So a few clues there about how you can do that.
That's absolutely brilliant. And so one of the things I was thinking as well when you were saying that is, because it is authentic and we're all kind of mentally unique, everybody's set of strengths is going to be different and unique and special to them. And I think sometimes, certainly in my case in the past, you can perhaps sometimes listen to other people's opinion outside of yourself. Particularly, like, you know, there's always this, oh yeah, get a good job, become an accountant, a lawyer, a teacher, and all of this sort of stuff. Somebody might just want to be something else, which is equally valid career path. And, you know, it might, you know, may or may not be as lucrative or whatever, but it's about being in service, and it's about being in the flow, and it's about delivering, you know, the best. So yeah, it's so important to be, you know, connected to your authentic strengths, basically. So knowing this, I mean, I know you said right at the start you've been on a bit of a, you know, there's both two sides of the coin of thinking about whether to focus on weaknesses and strengths, and you know, you've got many years experience in this and working in different organizations and coaching different people. How has this strengths approach changed your approach to your coaching practice?
Yeah, I did definitely had a bit of a turnaround on this, Phil, because back in the day I was taught the breakthrough model, which is sometimes I've heard it called by Mark Paischer the muscle coaching or muscular coaching, or he calls it the macho approach, where you go in, like, imagine someone's got a wound, you find the wound, you gouge it out, you clean the wound out, and then you pack it, and then only then can the person heal. You know, it's the old face up to your own your stuff, face up to your limiting beliefs, and smash right through, which actually can be really powerful. I mean, I've been trained in that, and I've actually been a client of that, and I've had some really life-changing moments, but people aren't always ready for that, and not everybody likes it. And also, I find in my professional relationships, you know, I mentioned we mentor for a charity, Phil, but sometimes, you know, in mentoring, you don't have permission to go where a paid client will go. So a paid client will say, here's my money, you know, I have imposter syndrome, I've got a limiting belief, I know where it comes from, I'm sick of it, I'm ready to break through it. But the reality is that not everybody is there. And in mentoring relationships or buddying, supervising, or just line management, for example, we might not have the permission to go to those places, and yet we still want to help a person. And I have worked with coaches before that say, well, if people aren't ready to face up to their stuff, I can't work with them. But the reality is we want to help people, we want to develop people wherever they are. And I find this strengths approach really helps. And I did some training with Mark and Magali Paischer, and they have a strategy they call lighting the spark, or elevating the spark. And, you know, they were saying that whenever you first work with someone, find the thing that lights them up, find their strength, find what they're good at, find what gives them joy, and elevate that, you know, make them more, help them be more resourceful. And I've been really inspired by the work of Martin Seligman, the author of the book Flourish. And he was saying how alarming it was that there's so much literature on how to help people with depression or anxiety or problems, but he was disturbed with how little work there is about helping people flourish. So we know what makes people depressed, but we don't know what makes people happy. And so he put his effort into defining this criteria of all the things that make a person happy or help them to thrive rather than merely survive. And he came up with his PERMA model. And what I found is that, okay, if someone wants a breakthrough, you can affect change very quickly. But even if someone's not there yet, or you don't have that type of relationship, you can really help someone in really quite powerful ways by focusing on what they have, focusing on their strengths, and then bringing in some of the elements of his PERMA model. So with some of the young people we mentor, they're not ready for they don't want coaching, they want help. But if you can bring in his PERMA model, where can we find purpose in their lives, where is their engagement, you know, what are their key relationships, how do we help them build relationships, where is the meaning and the achievement coming from, and bit by bit build those in without even going anywhere near the problem, which is problem thinking. What we can do is look forward, go for solution thinking, and actually build a person's resources. And this can be equally powerful as smashing through any limiting beliefs or brick walls that you have.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Really, really fascinating. All about drawing on the authentic strengths, focusing what you do want rather than fighting against what you don't want, and almost and helping the person potentially, like with baby steps or wherever they are, you know, to get to the next base so that they can go on basically to hopefully be the best that they can be in that authentic path. Really, really fascinating. And I love what you're saying about find what lights somebody up as well, because that's so true. Because I think ultimately everybody wants to live an authentic, fulfilling life. So if you can help and support other people to do that, that's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the rewarding bit for me, Phil. If you can help someone identify their strengths, create space for them, they, as I say, they become associated with all the things that are actually really true to them. And I think it's very easy to get drawn into someone else's agenda, what your work requires you to be good at, what your family might like you to be good at, what your friends might say, really gain some advantage from you being good at. And that's fine to be helpful, but actually to be able to become associated with the things that make you you, like I say, that affects your engagement, your motivation, but also your results as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really, really fascinating, really engaging, and really enjoyed it. Made loads of notes here myself as well, and I shall certainly be watching the replay. Really, really great. So I was going to pass over to John, or should we open it up to the floor for anybody that's got any questions for Michelle?
Yeah, I'm watching to see if anybody's coming off mute. Which I'll carry on watching. But in the meantime, I think I've got a really silly question. You said 80-20 in terms of your strengths and weaknesses. I presume that's you aim to focus on the strengths. If you were really lucky and you've got hardly anything that you need to do that's a weakness, maybe it's 90-10. Is there any benefit of spending a little bit of time on things that are challenging for you? Or that's just lucky, that's great that you're in a really good job that fits you so well?
Yeah, it depends on the individual, John. I personally think about where do you want to go, and what's the best way to get there. And I'd certainly look to my strengths first. If there was anything holding me back, or I felt like I could make better progress, if I were to improve it, then I'd give it some time. But no, if not, if you're in alignment, you're in a good place, you're happy, you're not looking for anything else to develop, then I'd say, yeah, swim with the stream, as Phil was mentioning a little bit earlier.
I suppose the thing is, are you pretending that there's nothing that your weakness is and you're just not doing those things? I suppose that's worth checking.
Yeah, and absolutely, John. And it's not about ability either. It's about that, what energizes you. So it's not to say that you're good at everything. In fact, you might recognize that you're really not that great at certain things. It's about where you put your focus and your energy, really.
And I keep coming back to when you talked about the spelling. It really reminded me, and you've probably heard all about it, the survey that Google did. And I think they were saying they were surprised when it all came back, but because they thought that there might be other things more important. But the biggest one was emotional safety. And that's very much similar to that child being able to talk about the fact that it wasn't good. And so it's on the one hand, and it reminds me of Checklist Manifesto as well, where he was talking about airlines looking into problems and trying to solve them, but the medical people actually trying to hide them because they didn't want to get sued. And also wild ideas can come out if everybody feels safe. So what would you say about organizations having a complete ethos about focusing on emotional safety and people's strengths?
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's a hot topic at the moment, John. I found myself running a lot of sessions on psychological safety, about well-being, and the collaboration mindset. They're all big topics that are in demand at the moment. And absolutely, so the strengths philosophy is definitely something you can apply to a team and to an organization. I think it might require some cultural change, which you're probably not surprised to hear. So I think in order to do that, people have to feel, like you say, emotionally safe to say the things that they're not so good at and focus on the things that they is a bit more in line with their strengths. I think there has to be good communication in the team about the collective strengths so that nothing gets missed and you can combine strengths powerfully as well. And I think it would take a bit of bravery on behalf of the leadership, because traditionally in a workplace you have your PDP and they tell you all the things that you're really good at, and then there's anything that you're not so strong in, they want you to work that up. And so for some managers that is a bit of a stretch and it's out of their comfort zone, but it's a conversation well worth having, I think.
Thank you, that's really good. I think Julie's going to ask a question. She's come off mute.
Oh, no, I just thought I'll come off mute just in case something comes up. But no, I love this approach very much, and it's always come naturally to me in my coaching and my training and things like that. And it connects with me using things like type, insights based on Jung's model and things like that are all nice ways of helping people legitimize their strengths. You know, they have this idea that, well, this model says that this is okay, so it is. And I think I just was very lucky. I don't know how it happened, but I was very good at physics, chemistry, and biology, and I was in a girls' grammar school, whose goal was just to get girls into medicine to prove that girls were clever, because it was a long time ago, and it was kind of, we've still got to keep getting this, banging this drum that girls are not more stupid than boys. And my chemistry teacher, she said, so what are you going to do, Julie? And she wanted me to do chemistry, because I always got like more than 97%, because it was very easy, actually. I don't know why it was easy for me. And I said to her, Miss, I'm going to do psychology. And she said, she just was so shocked. She said, that is a total waste of your brain. And I said, okay, but it's all right, because I mean, if she'd have been a scary person, it would have been awful. But she loved me because I was good at chemistry, and hardly any girls like chemistry, and so it was okay. And it wasn't going. I don't know where it came from to just say, no, I want to do psychology. I still don't know who even told me the word. I don't know where the word came from, but it's been great for me. And I think the thing I'd like to do now is, the other love was dance. And I think now I might start to go on, like, become a yoga dance teacher in retreats in hot places. That's my next dream.
Oh, wonderful.
Sounds great. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
It happens.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Julie, as well. That's a really nice story. And I'm glad that you did. Like you say, I think these things, it is just how your brain's wired. And sometimes in school, at work, you're quite conditioned. So it's quite good at that age to be able to recognise, no, actually, this is more me. Yeah.
I figured out what the other factor was, which I think is really important for parents to know. My parents didn't give a damn what I did. They didn't give a damn. They were very working class people. And when I said I wanted to go to university, my dad said, why do you want to do that? And I said, well, because I'm going to do psychology. He said, yeah, but you'll just get married and have kids. What's the point? I said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, all right. It was like they didn't have this sense of you had to have a career and you didn't have to be megally successful. I actually think that helped me.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it gave me a freedom.
Yeah.
I was free of expectation from them.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Julie, as well. And I think it's really nice for people watching this video to hear, because I went into a company once and did a session on, why you should play to your strengths. And we're setting some exercises, and one of the chaps wasn't doing it. So I went round to just chat to him and asked him, do you not understand it? You're not happy with what I've explained? He went, oh, no. He said, this doesn't apply to me. He said, when I was younger, as we were a young lad, they found you a job. You did the job. And then at weekends and when you retire, that's when you enjoy yourself. And he was a few years off retirement. And but I noticed during the breaks, he says, oh, I don't worry about this strength stuff. I said, but during the breaks, he's on his phone. I said, what was he doing? And his friend said he's playing strategy games. And I was like, that's interesting. I said, Dave, you like those strategy games? Yeah, I'm good at this. And okay. I said, naturally drawn to it. You're good at it? Yeah, I'm quite good at it. Okay, you're drawn to it, you're good at it, you learn it quickly, you get absorbed in it. Could it be a strength? No. He says, no, because he says, once I learned how to play chess, right? He's a blue collar worker. His friends have never played chess. They're looking at him weird. He said, I went to play chess. He said, and then I went to the library to read up books on how to play chess. Now they're really staring at him like he's got two heads. He said, yeah, but it's not a strength, because one time this guy, he was like really, really good, and I played him and he beat me, and he kept beating me. So I kept going back to the library, reading more books, and I played him 25 times and he still beat me. And I'm like, you're drawn to it, you learn it quickly, you're energized by it, and even after you got beat 25 times, you still got back up and researched how to do it again. Could this be a strength? And he said, no. He said no, and then I realised why. And he was a couple of years off retirement. And what would the consequences for him be if he had to admit that he'd spent his entire life pursuing work, his whole time doing work that was not to his strengths? And I just thought, that's quite sad, really. And I was very pleased to hear your story, Julie, because when I first signed up for the doctor when I moved to Stockport many years ago. literally day one with the doctor. And she told me, she said, oh, I didn't even want to be a doctor. I wanted to be a lawyer, but my parents didn't think it was grand enough. And there she is, well into her 50s doing a job she doesn't like. And she's telling the patients on day one. And I just think that's a real shame. I understand why people do it. There is enormous pressure out there.
I know, it's so sad, isn't it? It's all best intentions, but I think it'd be really great to get parent groups together somehow to sort of talk about these strengths and say, look for what is your child's strength, because that's and loads of it's just that they were pressured into wanting their children to be successful, to be happy, I guess. And yeah.
And that's one interesting one as well, Julie, because you talk about nurturing a child's strength. The other thing I'd encourage any parents to look out for is that bit about working on non-strengths to the point where they don't hold you back. Because sometimes the other thing I hear with people going, oh, well, we're not mathematical people, so we're not maths people. Oh, we're not studious people, we're more hands-on people. And that almost limits people. We can become limited by the things that we're supposedly not good at, as well as being good at too. So I think there's some wisdom to saying, well, let's leverage the things we're naturally drawn to and we're energized by, but let's give it enough time and attention. You know, we can be good at other things, we put effort in. I mean, maybe we need just enough of those to stand us in good stead.
Only if it's taking you in the right direction. Only if you need it to be able to live the life you're born for, really.
I'm just imagining how wonderful it would be in a world where teachers, parents, anybody working with children could be more aware of this kind of stuff. I've got Chris as well as come off mute. Chris, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, my question was, which seems to be thematic of a number of the things that we've just been talking about, and I just wondered whether you had any experience, Michelle, of having strengths-based conversations with young people, because it seems to me that the common theme here is an outcome job was somehow decided or agreed to at some point in your early life without really having any conversation. And I think one of the things that's been very valuable about the sort of this Seligman's and this sort of move towards thinking about strengths is actually creating some sort of a language around this, that people can have a conversation about it. And I just wondered whether you had an experience of sort of that earlier intervention in getting kids to talk about things, or whether you had some thoughts about that sort of idea.
Thank you. That's a good question, Chris. Yeah, it's not something I've done as part of my work. When I mentor young people, sometimes I mentor sort of older teenagers, and obviously try and bring that out in our conversations. But in terms of having conversation about their strengths, it's not something I've done, but I agree it's something that would be good to do. When I've worked with graduates or apprentices in workplaces, particularly with the graduates, I still find that this mindset is very much towards, I want the career, I want to climb the ladder, or I want the high profile job, without much sort of thought as to whether that's naturally where their skill set lies. I think probably finding people are more open to it, but still not something I'm finding is widely discussed, which is a bit of a shame. And I agree, it would be good to have this conversation earlier, particularly with teachers or people who work with young people.
The other thing that occurs to me that I wonder whether that by having a conversation with graduates or people looking for jobs, is that by going to try asking them to talk about a situation where they can explore a strength so that they can tell a story about it. I wonder whether you've had an experience where that is useful in them sort of crafting the way that they approach an interview. Because often in an interview, they want to hear a story about what you're good at, not just saying you're good at it, they want you to give an example of it. And I wondered whether this is a sort of a useful tool to help people try to explore some of those stories.
Yeah, I think definitely, Chris, that's a very useful tool. And I've come across this being used in businesses, and I've heard of it being used in inductions. So when you get new people on day one of working with a company, John asked about company culture. In some organisations, what they do is they get people to write about their best ever day at work, a bit like I described, or their proudest ever moment, and they get people to write it or craft it, and then to share the story with the rest of the group, so that on day one, everyone else in the group knows the person's strengths, and they've got a language around it already, and then it becomes part of the culture. And I think for young people going for job interviews, definitely, I would say, craft those stories, think about a time when you really use those strengths. what you'll notice is the person's body language change, they light up, and particularly in the interview where they might be quite nervous, the interviewer will see the authentic person shine. And really that's all an interviewer is looking for. Interestingly, there is such a thing as strengths-based interviewing. A colleague of mine does this. It changes the way that people onboard in a company. So yes, they need to be competent and have the right qualifications, but other than that, rather than a competency-based interview, they do a strengths-based interview, and that gets a much better cultural fit and considers whether the person would really shine in the job, not just whether they could, do it competently.
Yeah.
I'm just looking as well. I'm quite excited about what we could potentially put in the system to encourage parents and teachers to be a little bit more aware about this. So, for example, should we be encouraging children to nudge their teachers and say, "Oi, Miss whoever, have you heard about all this strength stuff?" And actually, how would we start?
Yeah, it's a good question. Do you know what? I don't know. Like I say, it's not something I've really done with schools, but I think it's something that would be really valuable. And again, it's not to do with ability. So it's not about whether I should do this or not. It's to do with, people with very different strengths can complete the same task to the same standard, but the way they get to that standard might be from a different angle. Someone might be through planning, someone might be through social interaction, somebody might be strategic mindedness, so on and so forth. So it would be good if you could have something, I suppose, that allows for those different approaches, or to explore a topic in a different way. So I don't know, if you're learning coding, for example, one person might be better at immersion, jumping straight in, another person might like to read a book. So all of these things, it'd be good to accommodate that. How you would do that in a whole school system, I have no idea where you would even start.
No. But it's things we can explore. And another thing is, I wonder if this is a personality issue as well, to some extent, that if we've got teachers that are very technical and not necessarily most strong on empathy, if we could just make them a little bit more aware that they might be not quite the right person to judge the strengths of the children because they're focusing purely on competency, that to moderate how they work with the children a little bit, perhaps in pressure, or like your chemistry teacher.
Yeah, they mentioned that finding the spark thing. I think if you're a teacher and educator, and like you say, you are focused on technical competence, just that mindset of finding the spark, I think would be a great place to start that.
Really good.
Yeah, I think there's something around this idea of having a conversation where young people are able to explore this, so that you get to a point where because everybody has strengths. I mean, that's the other positive about this, is that nobody doesn't have any. They may express themselves to different degrees in different circumstances and in different situations. But what would sort of interest me would be to have conversations with children whereby they share, and you say, well, okay, I want you to describe the strengths of somebody else, because that seems to be massively affirming that everybody gets to hear what other people see, which often is not the case, and maybe something that's a little bit of an antidote to this very negative way that young people seem to have got themselves into a mindset, which is not about what people are good at or what are their strengths, but some other deficit. And I think those sorts of conversations could be quite healthy.
Yeah, definitely. I'm already starting to hear teachers talk about growth mindset, which is quite nice. Even in primary school, my sister-in-law is doing that, which is lovely to hear. So I think this conversation is starting to happen. So fingers crossed, Chris, we will see that going forward.
And something you said, Chris, about the kind of promotion type of ladder, that's also kind of it takes people sometimes off on the wrong trajectory completely, because that's the only way to get more money. And I remember coaching a guy years ago, and he was saying, what happens in our company, engineering company, is the best engineers get promoted to be managers, and they're rubbish managers. They're rubbish at being managers. They don't want to be managers. Why don't we develop a parallel promotion where engineers get there's a promotion thing which is about being the master engineer, this engineer, and the next level engineer, and there's a promotion here for people who can deal with people and know how to bring teams together and can manage people. And but because there's only one promotion thing, which is to be the manager, if you want that esteem and you want the money, and you want that status, you've only got that one path. And I've always thought that his idea was a very good idea and could probably be replicated in lots of different other different companies as well, where people were getting prestige and a bit more money in relation to what their actual strengths were. I thought you just reminded me of it in what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Julie. I mean, with the career transition coaching I'm doing at the moment, a lot of the inquiries are coming in from people that have, really enjoyed doing, whether it's a software development or being an engineer or whatever it was, and they've gone on the promotion path, and then all of a sudden they're managing a team of 2, 4, 6, 10, 12 people and reporting into stakeholders and doing reports. It's not what they want to be doing.
It's not their bag, is it? It's not their strength.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you get a person who has got both of those strengths, but it's not their strength to empathise and they hate talking with too many people, and they want to just be fiddling around with things or fiddling around with their ideas, or more in the objective world. They're so interesting.
I remember the first time I saw this in a really bad situation was as a student, and one or two of the lecturers clearly knew their technical subjects, but they shouldn't have been in front of a group of 100 people talking to them, because one of them in particular was obviously literally scared to even turn around and engage with them.
Yes.
That's frightening.
So if we start to think strengths, and it's okay not to be good at everything, and then we might start to mold, blend different people together to do stuff, and it be okay, and of course, if you've got the part of the push was to be management was up there, but also it was not to be a failure. How can it be that you've got this incredible, brilliant engineer who it doesn't want to be a manager, but is seen as a failure for not being a manager? There's a lot of forces against this, really.
I want to say this is really powerful for me in terms of how we can potentially make a difference together and how we can help. But are there any other things that you want to tell us about that we've perhaps triggered in your mind, Michelle, in terms of what?
No, I don't think so. It's been really lovely discussion and lots coming out there. I completely identify what Julie's saying, and I've seen it done badly. I have seen companies with that path where people have the alternative option. But for me, it's definitely about that, being associated with the qualities that your natural strengths. I think if there's a couple of things to put across to people, one, try and create space for your strengths. So we've had this conversation today. Try and create space for your strengths in the workplace. A good conversation with your manager is useful, or your colleagues if you're self-employed, your partners, your stakeholders. And if you can't do it in your day-to-day life, see if you can find it in your personal life. So Julie mentioned dancing or yoga, for example, and I've just been teaching myself Irish, which turns out really difficult. So you can find space for these, and Phil mentioned badminton. So this is something that we can do. So I think creating space for your strengths would be a key takeaway, I think.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Has anybody got any other questions for Michelle?
I just want to think about my brother again, in terms of, he was dyslexic before anybody knew what dyslexic was about, and he showed me this with great pride, all these words he'd written, but it didn't make any sense at all, and the teacher had just put a tick at the bottom, and it's all very sad, and I didn't know what to do. But sort of like a year or so after, he did a technical drawing, which was magnificent, which I wouldn't be able to do at all, even if I put all of my effort into it. I wouldn't be able to have that precision and everything. And so it was brilliant, because I was able to say to him, that's what you're good at, Mark, that is absolutely brilliant. I couldn't do that in a million years. And ultimately found his path to running a little construction company with all his mates, because his other strength was people loved him. He's incredibly extrovert. Those were his skills, and that's what he then built his business on. Was he was good technically building stuff, and he had tons of friends who became his customers, and so his life all worked out, but with no thanks to the education system. They didn't think, okay, these are your 2 strengths. Well, maybe you could do that. It was like, he was rubbish. So he failed all his exams on verbal, and he just got, technical drawing. Yeah, he was good at that, but you know what I mean? And he was lost for a little while before he found his back. So it really, I think, it just keeps coming back to me. I think it would be wonderful if we get this in schools as well as organisations.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it can be so powerful, because the earlier people learn things, the more open and receptive they are to these kind of ideas, and the more it plants a seed at a lower point in the mind, if that makes sense, before you've got all this other noise and things. So, and especially if people are particularly young, they're still more in line with kind of like learning things for the fun of it, as opposed to when you get to your teenage years, you are a little bit more external validation, you care more about what people think and all of this sort of stuff. So the sooner it can be introduced, the better, basically. So
it plays to our next natural collaborative nature as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it plays to that whole thing. Oh, we're built different because we need to be, because we're a team type of thing, because the human species is a team. And I think having that idea is also good for people's self-esteem, rather than that talent is better than this talent. Just, we need everyone to be different because it's all together that we do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And can collaborate and everything. Wonderful.
And all of that's based on strengths, really, isn't it? Thinking about strengths.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We found it really insightful, really engaging. Thank you. And Michelle, how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to find out more?
Yes, my business is called Dive Deeper Development. I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's MichellePratt DDD for Dive Deeper Development. I have a podcast, Phil, and I can never say my Twitter handle properly. Dive Deep Depth, Dive DEP, DEVP. I should have chosen the easy one, but you'll find me there, divedeeperdevelopment.com as well. Yeah, I'd be really interested to know your views, your stories, and of course your applications for this as well.
And then we've got our next talk next week, which is all about getting better sleep, which is absolutely brilliant for restorative processes and the mind. And it's so important to get good sleep, and it can be especially difficult if it's hot weather like it is at the moment. So that'll be excellent, and that's by Richard at Live Light. So, and that's 7 o'clock next Wednesday. So from this one, it's just left to say thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us today. Really great interview, and thanks everyone for joining and all the great questions. And we'll see you next week.